Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Melissa and this channel is all about psychiatric drug withdrawal reactions and recovery. And I started this channel to bring awareness to this topic and talk about my own 4.5 year hellish journey through withdrawal and recovery. And today's video, or this video, I feel like I'm on a roll lately with filming a lot of videos again. I seem to go through spurts, but it was it's actually going to be response to another question that someone brought forward to me in an email. And again, I think it's going to be relevant for a lot of people because of the time of year. So the holiday season, this is about the holiday season and everything that goes on and how to navigate that. And I know that Christmas time is typically a joyful but also stressful time for a lot of people. And as we know, stress is one of the biggest triggers for waves. And so I think it's a particularly vulnerable time for people in this community. So I'm just going to take a chunk from this email and read it and respond to it. So this person went to a social gathering, a holiday type of gathering, and had a bit of a crash afterwards and doesn't feel leveled out from that crash. And the next social event is 2 days away. And this person said, while I'm happy for family to know what I am dealing with, I would strongly prefer to maintain privacy with neighbors and friends. So how should people who are recovering handle social situations through the holidays? Try to maintain pacing, so pacing yourself through kind of extending yourself and trying to push the boundary, I guess, of a lot of times just wanting to stay in your bubble, stay in your house, stay in your bed, whatever the situation might be that makes you feel safe. So starting to extend that and expose yourself to fearful and stimulating situations, but not entirely avoid outing so as not to build a fear wall, all the while maintaining privacy. So and then this person also said, an added complexity is for those of us that have spouses or partners that obviously want to attend these events and properly celebrate the holiday season. So this is, I guess, a multi-part question, and I want to address it because, again, there's a lot going on in the holiday season and all types of events, and I totally understand someone's wanting to maintain a level of privacy about this situation. And they didn't outline whether they mean privacy about any problem at all or privacy about withdrawal and all that goes on with these drugs and labeling it as such when they attend these things. And so I'll address the first part of this question. So how should people who are recovering handle social situations through the holidays? So, and try to maintain pacing, but not entirely avoid. Okay, so I guess I have to answer sort of all of it together, and I'll try not to make it too wordy and complex. So, again, I often on this channel talk about the withdrawal process and relate it to any chronic condition because a lot of what this person is asking here applies to especially an invisible chronic condition, whether it is drug. I get that the drug issue has other layers because of the gaslighting and people not understanding. It's not different. It's not the same in that way as something like diabetes where people they don't really understand it. Speaking from the perspective of a type 1 diabetic, they don't understand the complexities of it, but they know what it is and it's validated in the medical community. I don't know why I did the quotes, but it's validated in the medical community. So it's not entirely the same, but people who have chronic invisible conditions often struggle with these things because there's a level of expectation to maintain the pace of other people and even the workloads at home and in your professional space. And you don't really feel like you can talk about what you're going through in any invisible chronic condition because people don't understand it. They can't see it. So then they just have this expectation like, well, you look fine, so you should be able to keep up with everybody else, even if you're feeling horrible and sick on the inside. And that part of diabetes, especially when the burnout happens and people not understanding all of the nuances of it, it applies. And it is in many ways an invisible condition as well, although it's understood. And that's a big separation and difference. And I fully acknowledge that. So the way that I didn't handle this very well. So when I was doing poorly, so not in my second withdrawal, which was much more debilitating, but my first withdrawal, where I was functioning, but I was mentally so tormented and very invisible. Nobody could see what was going on in my mind. And I remember this was Christmas of 2019. There was a big family gathering at a local restaurant. They had booked out a room, and it would be normally something that I would hugely look forward to. I'm very much a social, extroverted person, and so I would normally look forward, and I had previous years really looked forward to going to that event. I used to travel home every year because I lived 3 hours away. I would travel home every year for it, unless it was blizzarding and the roads were closed or not advisable to drive on. And that year of 2019, I couldn't go. I got ready, and I remember my mom went, and I can't even remember exactly, but we had gotten into some type of argument before going, and it was about what I was dealing with. And this is where the not understanding part comes in, and wanted me to just try because she thought it would help me feel better. But I was so angry. I don't remember exactly what she said, but she said something that really hurt me about the situation, and I was like, I'm not going. And I still probably have it saved on the cloud somewhere. I filmed a video like this of myself bawling my head off and saying, I can't do this anymore. And I'm so tormented. When is this going to stop? And it would often go from crying to anger to self harming. Sometimes I was doing that in response to what I was going through in my head. And I was just devastated. And so I didn't handle it well, in the sense that I guess trying to push through and trying to navigate, well, what should I say to this person? I just wouldn't go. And I just felt like I couldn't face it at all. And part of that is because nobody understands. How do I tell someone not only that I'm struggling with this mentally without being locked up? Like, in the way that I was struggling mentally, most people would be like, you need psychiatric help. And then how do you explain the intensity of it and then add on the layer of, I was drug harmed? I mean, people would look at you like you had three heads, and then you'd feel so depressed and detached and mentally unwell that I could never be present for it anyway. I was just in my head constantly. And so I didn't handle it very well. And I also, as this person had explained or talked about in this email, having a spouse or partner that wants to attend, and I guess there's a different expectation that you attend with them. I didn't have that particular situation, but that would definitely make it a little bit harder. Even though my mom expected me to go, it's not quite the same. And this is a struggle, like I said, with most people with a chronic condition, a chronic invisible condition, but especially with the drug part of it that nobody is going to understand. And so if I would have had that expectation of a partner wanting me to go, needing me to go, I would have probably set parameters around it, like, okay, I'm only going to go for an hour or two, and then tell my partner I'll go and I'll mingle or do as much as I possibly can for this amount of time, and then need to leave. And I would have put that parameter probably around it ahead of time. Now, that's assuming that the partner understands and is willing to work with you through it. And hopefully that's the case, but it might not be. That would be the first thing I would do. The second thing I would do, it depends on what exactly this person is talking about when it comes to privacy, because the way that I would say it would be, I would tell the guests or the hosts or whoever it might be that either A, I'm dealing with some health problems, not feeling super well, so we're only going to stay for an hour or two. And if they didn't even want to divulge that much information, then I would say, hey, I'm just dealing with some stuff right now. I'm a little bit stressed out and I might not be able to stay for the full length of the event. And it's more vague. some people might be comfortable with just saying I'm having some health issues, and some people might not even want to say that much. So in that case, I would say, hey, I'm just dealing with some personal stuff and I won't be able to stay as long as I might normally. That's the way, that's the two parts phase of it that I would do if I had a partner that had that expectation. And yeah, that's how I would navigate it if it was this circumstance for me. As far as the pacing, well, what I said kind of addresses that, because within one event, I would have a time limit on it. But this person also outlined having the events close together. So on multi nights, having them too close together before you've recovered in between. And that is difficult to plan ahead because obviously you don't know. Say you have 5 events planned in December and maybe you were feeling well in November, or maybe you weren't. And because this is so unpredictable, you're like, okay, well, your partner signed you up or whatever. And so the time comes, you go to one, you crash, and you haven't fully recovered before the next one. It's hard to be able to plan those things ahead of time because you never know how you're going to feel. But it's a back and forth between, again, maybe you could try going to the second one and have that space around it, like I'm only staying for an hour or two and everybody's going to know that. Or sometimes, like just in the case of chronic conditions in general, you can't go. So I'll just say this as sort of a side note. So I had a friend that I was friends with for about 10 years. She was a really good friend of mine. I actually met her through her husband, who I was friends with in high school. And she was the new girlfriend who became the wife. And then her and I became really good friends. And this person knew I was diabetic. Obviously, I had been diabetic for years already. I've been, like, when I met her. And so she understood as much as someone without type 1 can understand. And then I developed celiac disease several years later. So I developed diabetes in 98. And then I had chronic stomach problems for many years that were always misdiagnosed. And then everything came to a head with that problem in about 2011 ish, going into 2012. And we turned 30 in 2012, and she's the same age as me, and so was her husband. And they always went all out. Their birthdays are only a day apart. And so they were going to go all out for their 30th birthday. And I was supposed to go, expected to go, and normally would absolutely love to go. But I was feeling so unwell. And this is when my celiac disease hit a peak, but hadn't been diagnosed yet. And I remember telling her over a text message, plus it was January and I live in a extremely cold part of Canada, and she lived about 20 minutes out of town, and I didn't feel comfortable driving. I was feeling really unwell, and I told that to her, and she got really upset and mad, and we stopped being friends after that. And I don't remember if we had a verbal fight or if it was just kind of some short messages back and forth, and then she unfriended me on social media. I don't remember all of the details, but it was devastating. And that is an example of having to back out of something that you had fully intended on, planned to RSVP that you're going to. This illness rears its ugly head. You feel really unwell and you just can't go. And it's unfortunate. And we were not friends after that for over 10 more years. So we were friends for 10 years and then not friends for 11 years, or was it 12? And then she just came back into my life, was it earlier this year or last year? I can't remember. But these types of things that's why it's so difficult to have a chronic condition, any chronic condition, because of these things. And so sometimes you might have to just be like, I can't go, because it becomes a point where, your health has to be number one. And as much as you don't want to disappoint your partner, sometimes it's just like that knowing, it's a fine line, and it's a bit of a dance. Like, how do I know when to push? And how do I know when my body is screaming at me enough where I need to just take it easy? And that's a very personal and difficult decision a lot of the time, because I talk about on this channel that nurturing and stretching, you have to do a lot of self-care when your nervous system is in this state, but there also gets to a point where you need to start stretching and exposing yourself and not avoiding everything, because you have to kind of reteach the nervous system that safety component again, because it's perceiving everything as dangerous from these horrible, horrific drugs and the chemicals that they impact. And so, sorry, I just lost my train of thought there for a second. That navigation can be really tricky. But I do feel like, and I felt this way when I was coaching, deep down, people still had some access to their intuition. They just often would ignore it, and it would get confused with this sort of signaling of, is this sort of fear telling me I should pull back, or is this fear just there and I need to understand it's part of this nervous system issue from these drugs, and I'm going to decide to push forward a little bit anyway. And it can be hard to navigate, but most people still have some access to their intuition. And I say, listen to it. If your body and your mind and your intuition is really telling you, I'm just too ill to go to this one, sometimes you have to just take the bad that comes with saying, you know what, I just can't do it today. I just can't. And I've been in that situation with the drugs and with my diabetes before this happened with the drugs. And it's difficult and it's isolating. And that's one of the well-known, very difficult aspects of chronic illness. So you try the best that you can, but sometimes you just can't. And that has to be okay. And you have to kind of give yourself grace through that, which can be hard, very hard. And another isolating aspect of this. The third part was, not entirely avoid outings so as not to build a fear wall. So again, this comes down to the best times, in my opinion, to do that stretching are when you're either at baseline or you're in a window. When you're full on in a wave, crash, setback, usually not the best time to do that stretching. You need to meet the nervous system where it's at in those times and really try to lull it and calm it down in every way that you can. It's usually at baseline when maybe you're not feeling great, like in a window, but you're not horrible, where you try to do that extension. And that's when you can really, because you don't want to avoid everything forever, and that can become a real trap that I was falling into in my own recovery, where I had people further along in me than me in the journey chronologically, but still not well, telling me, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, it's overstimulating, avoid this, don't eat this, don't do that. And it can nearly drive you crazy. And I don't personally believe that that's the best approach to recovery. Because I feel like you'll be avoiding things forever, which can then backfire on you and teach the brain, okay, this must be dangerous. I need to protect you and up the symptoms. That's the way I feel about it. And it is a complex thing. I mean, everything about this drug journey is nonsensical in a lot of ways and complex and frustrating completely. But this is a difficult time of the year, even when you're feeling well sometimes, because of the stress of it and the expectations and just so much going on, the financial aspect of it. So I hope this answers your question, and let me know your thoughts on where you guys are at with this part of this time of year and how you're navigating through that. And let me know if it makes sense and if you have any other questions. And I'll see you next time. Bye.